Welcome back, everyone, and thanks for joining me for this one. Today we are talking about something I think is genuinely the defining question of this decade for our profession. What happens when AI moves faster than our ability to check it? I'm calling this talk the verification layer, AI, governance, and the evolution of the information professional, and we are going to look at it through the lens of what I call the fifth industrial revolution, or 5IR. This isn't a talk about whether AI is good or bad for libraries. It's a talk about who stands between AI's speed and an institution's integrity, and why that job, quietly, has become one of the most important in any organization. Let's get into it. Here's the thing about AI hallucinations: they almost never stay small. Look at this risk escalation funnel. It starts with something as minor as a false citation slipped into an internal report. Nobody notices. Then it shows up as a fabricated statistic in a PhD thesis. Then it gets embedded in a clinical summary. Now we are talking patient care. And by the end of the funnel, it's shaping flawed policy briefs that inform actual government programs. That's the hallucination tax, and it compounds invisibly, one unchecked step at a time. The point I want you to sit with is this: an unverified AI hallucination doesn't end as an error. It becomes a consequence, a real one, downstream, often far from where it started. So who catches it before it travels that far? That's exactly where we are headed next. So if hallucinations compound as they travel, something has to stand in the way. Look at this diagram. On the left, AI output, fast but messy and scattered. On the right, validated institutional knowledge, organized and dependable. In between sits the verification layer, and that's us. Information professionals are the essential risk managers of the AI era, full stop. We verify sources, we validate evidence, and we protect the integrity of decisions before those decisions get made. And here's the uncomfortable part: remove this layer, and organizational risk doesn't disappear, it just accumulates quietly, out of sight, until it isn't quite anymore. This reframes our entire value proposition. We are not the people slowing things down. We are the people keeping the whole system honest. But if that's true, why doesn't our education system train for it? Let's look at that gap. This is where it gets frustrating, honestly. Follow this bottleneck diagram top to bottom. It starts with legacy curriculum design, often shaped by senior academics who haven't had hands-on experience deploying AI or modern tech themselves. That feeds into outdated assessment, where students are still preparing for slow-changing UGC-NET style examinations. Then comes stagnant internships, placing students into libraries still dependent on manual processes or outdated systems. And the result? Graduates come out the other end lacking the AI literacy and workflow skills employers are actively demanding right now. This isn't a small gap, it's a structural one, built into the pipeline itself. And when a system fails to prepare people, people usually find another way around it. That's exactly what's happening right now with students, and it's worth watching closely. So while the traditional syllabus sits there, largely unchanged, students have quietly built their own loop around it. Look at this cycle. A student starts treating generative AI as a personal technical mentor. From there, they deploy modern tech, Koha, DSpace, with step-by-step AI guidance walking them through it. Then they start experimenting with AI-assisted cataloging and metadata generation on their own. And they learn through live troubleshooting, effectively bypassing the constraints of UGC-NET style preparation entirely. Notice the traditional syllabus sitting off to the side in this diagram, present, but increasingly irrelevant to how these students are actually learning. The takeaway here matters a lot. Independent learners today will define the profession tomorrow. So the question for institutions isn't whether to catch up, it's how fast. And catching up starts with a new professional identity. Catapreneurship is a term a researcher wants to introduce. It's a conceptual framework a researcher has been developing to shift cataloging from a purely technical function into an opportunity-driven profession. Picture this as a structure held up by 4 pillars. Cataloging itself, the intellectual foundation, advanced metadata expertise. Entrepreneurship, creativity, innovation, the ability to create value across sectors. Technology, generative AI, digital tools, emerging information systems. And emotional intelligence, resilience, ethical practice, genuine human collaboration. Together, these 4 pillars hold up what I'm calling the 5IR knowledge architecture. None of these pillars works alone anymore. A cataloger with only technical skill and no entrepreneurial instinct gets stuck in back-office work. A cataloger with all 4 becomes something else entirely. And that transformation is exactly what we are going to map out next. Let's make that transformation concrete with a direct comparison. On one side, the traditional cataloger, primary focus on technical function, institutional role as a back-office administrator, output limited to static records, and a core driver of simple process compliance. On the other side, the 5IR Catapreneur, primary focus shifts to value creation, institutional role becomes metadata consultant, output turns into dynamic knowledge architecture, and the core driver becomes emotional intelligence and innovation. Read straight across each row and the shift becomes obvious. This isn't a minor upgrade to the same job, it's a different job wearing the same title. And that shift in role brings a new kind of responsibility with it, one most of us haven't fully reckoned with yet, our own relationship with privacy and data literacy. This one hits close to home for a lot of MLIS professionals, myself included at points in my career. Look at this matrix: technical privacy literacy along the bottom, ethical privacy awareness up the side. Most of us sit in that bottom right quadrant right now, deeply concerned about pattern tracking, genuinely, but lacking the technical understanding of how vendor architecture actually works underneath. The quadrant we need to move toward is the top right, capable of actually auditing cloud-based systems and third-party discovery services, not just worrying about them from a distance. Here's the honest summary. And MLIS education strengthens our library-specific privacy awareness, but it doesn't meaningfully improve our broader personal data privacy literacy. Awareness without technical capability is a half-finished skill. So how do institutions actually close that gap? That's where governance comes in. Knowing something is risky and being ready to act on it are 2 very different things. Look at this bar chart. Governance mechanisms tend to run ahead in private institutions, while willingness to actually seek out training lags behind, particularly in public institutions. And underneath that gap sits real fear. Librarians worry about data privacy breaches, algorithmic bias, and violations of intellectual freedom, and those fears are legitimate. Now look at the second diagram: Middle East, South Asia, Africa, all connected around one central idea. There is no one-size-fits-all approach to this. What actually drives responsible adoption isn't just recognizing the risks, it's AI ethics competence paired with genuine institutional support. Risk awareness alone doesn't move anyone forward. So what does a workable governance structure actually look like in practice? Let's look at one real framework. This is one of my favorite frameworks to point to, because it's genuinely practical. Picture a compass with 4 directions. Human oversight and professional judgment at the top. Transparency and accessibility to the right. Privacy and intellectual freedom at the bottom. Equity and inclusion on the left. Every responsible AI decision in a library should be checked against all 4 of these points, not just one that happens to be convenient. 2 things sit alongside this compass that I think get overlooked. First, the ITAC mandate. These guidelines are meant to be a living document, prioritizing continuous learning over any one-time policy decision. And second, what I'd call the ultimate agency, AI adoption is not an obligation. Libraries are fully entitled to reject AI tools where the risks genuinely outweigh the benefits. Now let's bring all of these pieces together into one architecture. So here's everything we've covered, brought into a single picture. At the very center, in what I'm calling verification cobalt blue, sits risk management, the verification layer actively shielding institutions against the hallucination tax we opened with. Around that core sits human capital, catapreneurship, emotional intelligence, continuous AI self-tutoring. And wrapped around the whole structure is governance, ALA guidelines, vendor privacy audits, cross-regional policy work. Notice how each ring depends on the one inside it. Governance without human capital is just paperwork. Human capital without verification is just enthusiasm. And here's the line I want you to remember from this entire framework. Technological innovation without human-centric governance and verification is mathematically guaranteed to compound institutional risk. Not likely. Guaranteed. Let's close with what that actually means for how we see our own value. So let's bring this all the way home. AI without verification is not simply an imperfect tool. It is a liability disguised as an asset, and that distinction is the entire argument of this talk. Every fabricated citation, every unchecked statistic, every hallucination that slips through unexamined, carries a cost that shows up later, somewhere else, in someone else's decision. And the people trained to catch that before it happens, to verify, to validate, to hold the line on integrity, have never been more valuable than they are right now. That's not a comforting slogan. It's the new baseline for how our profession needs to think about itself. Thank you so much for watching. If this reframed how you think about your own role, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments, and if you haven't already, come join the AI4Lib community. Details are just below.